Do you wish somebody wrote down the recipe for your parenting challenges? Did you want tips and tricks to become a better mama for you and your babies? I know I do. If you're a mother who feels that you are doing the best you can with the hands you've been dealt, but you're still getting it done, then this podcast is for you. I'm so glad you tuned in to Nailed It Motherhood because we might have the recipe that nobody wrote down. What's up, everybody? You're listening to Nailed It Motherhood Podcast, and I'm your host with the most, Tamara Eldridge. I am so excited to introduce you today to our lovely guest. I knew this woman as someone who is one of the faithful teens growing up from our church years ago at our home church. And our lives took a different path, but it is amazing that we have this opportunity that brought us back together again. And I know my mom, Sister Phyllis, would have been very happy to see this moment transpire. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm happy to introduce to you Annastahia Jackson.
Hello.
Well, before we dive into our episode for the day, I want to say thank you, Annastahia, for showing up. And thank you so much for being patient with me today. I appreciate you being patient and working with me as we are in the literal infant stage of Nailed It Motherhood Podcast.
No problem.
But we're going to get this done. And we know that something good is about to come up out of this today, huh?
Yes, it is. And I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for the invite. It's going to be amazing.
Absolutely. It absolutely will. But before we jump into your herstory segment, I'm going to read a bio from prophetess Annastahia Jackson, and then I'm going to share a quick Tavi tale with the listeners today before we jump in. Listeners, we are talking about prophetess Annastahia Jackson. She's a 2001 graduate of Indiana Area Senior High School in Indiana, Pennsylvania. She has a strong passion for travel and tourism industry. She has served in ministry since she was 16 years of age. During that time, while in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, prophetess Jackson served in several capacities, both locally and at the national level. Prophetess Jackson is a single mother of 3 beautiful children, a set of twins, Jeremiah and Olivia, and Yana Jackson. The Lord called prophetess Jackson just as he did with Abraham. The Lord said to her, leave her family and move to a place that was unfamiliar to her. So she currently resides in the Glass City, Toledo, Ohio. After obeying the Lord, she was affirmed as a prophetess in 2020 and ordained as executive pastor in 2021. In 2022, the Lord birthed out of her Gracefully Broken but Beautifully Restored Women Conference. In 2023, the Lord expanded the original vision of a women conference to now being a conference, which is empowering women and men to grow naturally and spiritually. To become the men and women of God they are called to be, prophetess Jackson has experienced brokenness in a way many would have given up. She is now able to tell the story of how God is bringing restoration to her life. Prophetess Jackson is currently writing her first book. She's relying on God to bring healing and deliverance through her personal life story. She is a yielded and willing vessel of God. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much, and we welcome prophetess Annastahia Jackson. But before we do that, we also want to welcome a brand new baby into the world by the name of Chloe, who was born to Kiki Sheard and Jordan Kelly. So congratulations and shout out to Kiki, who is a new first-time mom to Chloe Sheard. I wanted to share that information because years and years ago when I was in college, I was driving around as the choir director of United Soul Ensemble. And I was rocking out to Wave Your Banner, hardcore rocking out. Thought I was a gospel thug back then. And that was my jam, right? So I started listening to that song again recently because it's been keeping me up now that, I started this podcast and I've been having longer days and I'm driving and I'm listening to Wave Your Banner. And Tav has been really liking that song. And so she's like, Mom, I want to hear that song. The one that says, wave your hands up, wave your hands up. And so I told her, yeah, that song keeps me up. That keeps me up. Last week, I told her about that. So this week, we're on our way to school. And she's like, Mom, can you play that song? Because I need to stay awake. I need that song. Can you wave that song that says A-I, A-I? So that's just a reminder that my child is always watching me. And also that my child is a whole nut job that God has blessed me with. So I now give the floor to you, Annastahia, so that you can share your herstory segment today.
Well, thank you. Let's begin with this scripture. I was reading in Joel chapter 2, verse 25 in the Amplified. And it says, and I will compensate you for the years that the swarming locust has eaten, the creeping locust, the stripping locust, and the growling locust, my great army which I set among you. You will have plenty to eat and be satisfied, and praise the name of the Lord your God, who has dealt wondrously with you. And my people shall never be put to shame. And I use that scripture as a foundation for me in my personal journey. I was a victim of molestation at the hands of my father years ago. And a lot of people in our community, Tamara, knew what was happening. And so you could only imagine the embarrassment, the shame that one would feel, because now your family's name is out there and everybody knows, oh, that's so and so's daughter. And, and then you're like, okay, well, why do I have to be different? Not having a 2-parent household and everybody else has both parents. And so that was really the beginning of my brokenness. Then it transitioned into relationships. I was not promiscuous, but I had a natural teen's mind, like, hey, let me see who I can date. But I knew I was different. I knew that I couldn't just end up with somebody and that be it. So some things happened. My grandmother was raising me at a certain point in my life, and it was not pretty. So it felt like I went from one abuser to the next abuser. She didn't sexually assault me like my father did, but there was a lot of verbal, mental, and emotional abuse. And so here again, I find myself in a place again of brokenness, just in a different aspect or a different area, and how it affected me. But yet I wanted to be like a normal teen, and I didn't know what normalcy was because I had to grow up too fast. Had to be the mom to siblings and, making sure that they're okay while yet I'm the one being abused. And so moving into graduation, the thing that I did to bring me some peace, before I went to graduation, there was a time my grandmother was in an auto accident, and a tractor trailer ran his light and hit her side, the passenger side, unfortunately. And that was the end of her life. And I held all of that unforgiveness in. And I'm thinking like, yeah, I'm praising God. I'm lifting my hands. I'm worshiping God. But all the while, my worship to God was tainted. It was polluted because I had that seed of unforgiveness. And so it wasn't until I started writing my book that I realized that. I graduated high school, wanted to be a flight attendant. And as if that wasn't enough, I was sick. I was a sickly child, seizures and other health conditions that I've endured, but yet God had a whole master plan that I didn't want to accept. I knew I was called at 6, but I didn't want to accept that I was different. So then some things transpired, and I was in abusive relationships where a man was just verbally abusive. I was in a long distance relationship with a man from another state, and he just was verbally and mentally abusive. And I was like, what are you doing? So again, that's all I knew was brokenness. So when you're not completely healed, you gravitate to what's broken, what's familiar to you. And so my life has just been broken piece after broken piece after broken piece. But it started going in the upswing after that relationship ended. And then, so I thought it was in the upswing. I would bury myself in church work. I was an administrative assistant to a pastor back home. And once again, nobody knew because I was just too afraid to say what was happening and too afraid to ruin that pastor's name or his reputation as a pastor. So he would flirt. He would, do things that were inappropriate when nobody was looking, even though he was engaged to somebody else, and I'm just like, okay, God, you got to get me out of this one. You got to get me out of this, God. And God said, do you trust me? And I was like, okay, yeah, I trust you. And God said, I'm going to get you out, but you got to want to have a desire to be delivered from where you are. And I was ready, but obviously my spirit was still crisscross. As I say, it was just like, which way do I go? Which way? Doing the jumping jacks, the in and out, crisscross. And so I was in another relationship, and the pastor didn't want me to leave the church. I was, quote unquote, the meat and the potatoes of that church because I knew the ins and the outs. I knew the word. I knew how to run a ministry. But you didn't want me to be happy because you weren't happy without me being there. So I suffered again. And then the guy was like, oh, you need to do this and you need to do that. You need to buy you some eyelashes and you need to put on all this makeup. And, I really don't have to wear it, but I choose to wear it. There's a difference. And so I wasn't enough for him at the end of the day. And I mean, this man could sing. He could sing his tail off. And I would put his messages together and make him look good. But at the end of the day, I was still under the shadow of somebody else, but it wasn't the shadow of God. So again, I'm now in another broken state. And finally meet my now ex-husband, and we date for 2.5 years, get married, have 3 beautiful children, and then in the midst of all of that, you're having an affair. So again, another form of brokenness. And God is like, hey, remember I said, but God sent warning not to marry him through my mother. And I didn't listen. But I listen today. Trust and believe. When she say no,
Mama's always
she
right.
means no. You know my mother. Her no is a hard no. And, you know, the fact that I went through all of that, I've gone through the divorce publicly. There were pictures on Facebook. There were pictures on Instagram, and you name it, on every platform. And people in different churches that we fellowshiped with knew. So it wasn't a secret. And the pastor kept turning a blind eye and a deaf ear to it, you know. So went through that, and then my children currently reside with him and his wife because the judicial system is not right. It's not fair. If you don't have the dollars to pay somebody. But in the end, vindication and validation is happening. Restoration is taking place in my life. There was a point my children wouldn't even answer my phone calls. As a mother, you hear your children calling somebody else mom, and that's like somebody spitting in your face, slapping you in your face, kicking you in your gut. And there were times I wanted to give up. I'm not going to fake the funk. I was like, God, what in the world? This is not you. But God said, if you hold on, you'll still make it through. You'll survive this. You are, as Beyonce says, and I don't like Beyonce. Let's get that out there. I don't. But she said, I'm a survivor.
Don't give up.
I couldn't give up because I knew God in the end. God had a master plan. There were times that I laid in my bed and just cried myself to sleep. Went to bed crying, wake up crying, went to work, had to hurry up and put something on my face so my eyes weren't so swollen from crying. But I've learned, like the scripture says, if you suffer with me, you'll reign with me. And I'm finding that to be true. That's all I know is the word of God. That's what I know. That's what I live, I eat, sleep, and I breathe. You know, there was one woman, and I refer to her as Mother Lady. And such a sweet spirit. And you know who she is. But she always had a heart for God. And you could see the example that of the life she lived. You know, you could tell she meant God all the way. And that woman has blessed my life up until her final days. She has blessed my life. She's the reason that I stand in the place that I stand in, because I could go back and reflect on the Sunday school lessons that she would teach, on the Tuesday night Bible band lessons, you know, and I could hear her in my spirit. Don't give up. Keep fighting. You deserve better. You're going to get better. You're going to win this. So I could, you know, the encouragement, even though I wasn't in the same city, I don't reside in the same city, it was just a phone call. Or if I would come home, I would see her. The smallest thing meant the world to me from that woman, because that woman has embraced me in my flaws, but she has embraced me in my victories. And that's what I want people to know is even though it looks dismal, the sun will shine again. Hold on. There is a rainbow at the end of the tunnel. There's a rainbow that you have to look forward to. I was broken. And I say was because I don't live in brokenness. It doesn't define who I am. My victories speak for what I've went through, and the victories ahead speak for where I'm going to.
I don't even know where to start. I don't, like, you just said so much. But I kind of came up with your episode title as you were speaking, because you kept saying brokenness, brokenness, brokenness. But you're writing a book.
Yes,
You're healing.
absolutely.
You are victorious, whether it looks like it or not.
Absolutely.
To other people, to outsiders, you are walking in your victory. I think that I am going to call your episode Broken Crayons Still Write.
That's a good title for this podcast. Broken Crayons Still Write.
Yeah. And I say that to Tavia to remind her, just because the tip broke off doesn't mean you have to throw it away.
That's right.
It still serves a purpose. And it still
does its
makes...
job.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Say that one more time.
It still does its job.
Right.
Just because the tip isn't there the way that it came in the original package,
right,
doesn't mean that it's not useful.
It's very
or
useful.
usable.
And it still creates art. Beautiful art. So
Yes.
use it. And what I'm hearing you say, despite all the trauma that you've gone through, is use me. Not in the way that you've been used, but you're
right.
You're lifting your hands and you're saying, God, use me.
I'm at your service.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, that's your I told you it would come as we spoke. So that's your episode title, Broken Crayons Still Write.
I love it.
Yeah. Parenthood, because this is a motherhood podcast. Mm-hmm. Your parenthood came out of your marriage. What was it that made you not hear your mom? And I'm asking that for a reason.
So I can honestly say that the part that did not allow me to hear my mother was because I felt like at one point my mother, some of us always say, oh, you just don't want this for me and you just don't want that for me because you were there. And I was like, okay, Mom, I hear you, but I don't hear you. And why did I not listen to what I heard my mother say? The warning. Because I was too busy being in my flesh. I was too busy doing what Annastahia wanted to do. Annastahia just wanted to be married. Annastahia didn't want to go and just wait because the man that she was with was initially, the one prior to him was supposed to be the one God sent, but God had already gave me a word that the first one wasn't it, because he had loose lips, and they say loose lips sink ships. So I didn't want to hear my mom myself. I didn't want to hear what she had to say, because I was like, man, she's been single all these years. What does she know anymore?
I think that's hard. That's a hard position to be in, because it's hard to take advice from people who have been single,
Yes.
especially for so long. But it's your mom, so you're
Yep.
kind of like wondering why she's telling you no. Is it because you're really looking out for me? Or is it because you don't want me to be happy? Or is it because fill in the blank? So you wonder why. It's hard. But what I found, even looking back over some of the things that I think about what my mom said, mom is usually right, even about things that you don't want them to be right about. And that's why I asked the question, because you went back and you said she was right and I should have listened. But when you want what you want, you know you don't want to hear that.
That's it. You don't. You really don't. And you just like, okay, God'll forgive me.
Right.
But even in God forgiving you, knowing that God would forgive you for walking in error and disobedience, you still had to go to God and ask for the forgiveness anyway. So I had to go back and make amends with my mother. And I had to apologize to my mother for not listening to her. Because my mother was the one that was the caregiver for my children when I would have to work. When it ultimately should have been him and myself. But because of the situation that I was in and I allowed myself to get in, I now had to go back and be like, okay, mom, you were right. I'm sorry. I should have listened. I should have taken your advice. And then it wouldn't have been, and it wouldn't have gotten to this point. Had I listened the first time, I wouldn't be in the situation that I'm in.
Do you carry shame not having your kids?
Yeah.
I know that's hard. I heard it.
It's hard because the shame that I felt was not just for me, but I felt the shame for my children. And the reason I say that is because as a child, I knew what it felt like to not have both parents in the same house. So I felt like I was inflicting the same pain and misery on my children that was inflicted upon me. And I told God that I wanted to be better. I wanted to be different, but yet I found myself in the same place. And so I had to ask God to help me deal with that aspect, because it wasn't that I did anything to put myself here other than walk in disobedience and marrying the man. I don't regret having my children. It's just the man, you know. But now it's gotten to a place where I began to forgive myself, because that's
Right.
where it really starts, is forgiving yourself, not pointing the finger at anybody else, but forgiving yourself, permitting yourself, giving yourself permission to forgive yourself for what you did not do.
Right. God is a just God.
Yes, he is. And that's the part that I love about him. He's so forgiving and so loving that it doesn't matter if you messed up today, you still
Right.
have grace. You still have grace. So I walk in the grace, I walk in forgiveness. And that's what's pushing me even more to do what I do, to help other people that have walked that journey, whether it be from the molestation or whether it be from the divorce or the custody battle. I want people to know that there's still hope. You're not trash. You're not somebody's garbage, but you are somebody's treasure. And that's where I am. That's where I am. And so I'm excited to know, you know, something that I didn't share. Um, God has allowed me to birth this year, in the same year. Um, God allowed me to birth Gracefully Broken Outreach Ministries Incorporated. And the purpose behind it is to bring healing to people who are struggling in forgiveness, who have been mishandled, misused, and abused. And not just that aspect, but different aspects, financial literacy, so God has really blessed me in the midst of my error, my disobedience. I'm transparent about it, but I'm also transparent about my victory. I'm also transparent about the restoration aspect of what I've been through. And so, in order for me to draw the people, I have to be transparent, and that it's not that I'm drawing the people, it's that God is drawing the people through me.
So, are you saying the same year you're dealing with this custody battle is the same year that the ministry? So, this is like recent,
October
like
this year,
while
recent.
we're chatting it up, talking about scheduling this podcast, recent. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
brave woman.
So it God said, why sit on something that I've given you the vision for? Why sit and wait for somebody to come to you when I'm placing you in a position to go to them, to bring them up out of obscurity and heal, cause healing to be their portion? So why sit just because I've gone through and I'm going through? When I tell you vindication is on my way, it's on its way for me. So when it's on its way for me, it's on its way for somebody
Yes,
else.
absolutely. And that's why you're here.
Yeah,
That's what's up.
this is exactly why I can't sit and be idle, you know, because there's too many souls that are broken, that need restoration, that needs to be created into being whole, holistic. And it's not, I'm all about salvation, but I'm also about allowing people to be who they are and walk their journey out. I didn't have the hand of somebody to walk with me
Right.
through my journey, all that, like that.
That's the
But
only way
here,
it's authentic.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm only here because God allowed me to be here. I didn't lose my mind. There's times that I felt like I was going to lose my mind, but I was just like, it's not an option. You have 3 children to live for. Whether they speak with you now or whether they speak with you later, you've bridged the gap. And so God is allowing restoration in those relationships between me and my children as we speak.
As we speak.
So if
Absolutely.
God's doing it for me, who are you that he won't do it for?
And there it is. I mean, what more is there to say?
You just have to let God be God.
Absolutely. I think, yeah, I'm not gonna ask you any more questions because we know that you've been through enough. We know that there's something inside of you that is constantly being worked on. And we
Absolutely.
know that your healing is working its way towards victorious victory. Like it's just whatever the greatest victory there is, we know that that's where you're going. We know that you're hopeful that that restoration is going to be coming soon.
Yeah,
And I'm
the
hopeful because I can hear I hear a peace about it.
mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we're going to go ahead and have a little fun with you then.
Okay.
And we're going to introduce, well, I introduced it in episode 2, but I will reintroduce it.
Okay.
It is a game called Tea Time. I've come up with a
Okay.
bunch of questions. Some of them are deep. Some of them are just for fun. And I've already provided them in advance to Annastahia, but I'm choosing them randomly. And she has no idea what questions she will be getting during this recording. She will have 3 minutes to answer as many questions as she can and give us just a little insight into who she is. So, Annastahia, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Awesome. Listeners, are you ready? Yes. Wonderful. We're going to go ahead and get started. The first question: how do you want to be remembered?
How do I want to be remembered? I want to be remembered as someone that did not give up, but somebody that has persevered and has reached and touched lives, not for my sake, but for the sake of the kingdom.
Awesome. What's the most unexpected compliment you've received?
Whew. Um, I had somebody come to my conference and they said to me, "This is not what I expected. I didn't expect you to be able to do this by yourself, but you've done a great job." And I was like, wow. Some of the things that people say.
Yeah, that's the one that makes you go, Did you meet your own requirement for how many children you would have?
No.
How many did you think you were going to have?
I wanted to have 5.
Sure.
That was my right. That was my initial ask of God,
Well, you almost made it.
almost shy of 2.
Uh, do you use affirmations?
Do I use affirmations?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes. If you could talk to anyone from your past, who would it be?
Oh, if I could talk to anybody from my past, I think it would be my grandmother.
What age would you choose to be for the rest of your life, and why?
Oh, this is just too fun. I think I would be 30. And the reason I say 30 is because I felt young. I'm now getting older. I'm past 30. And so I don't like the elements that I'm feeling.
That was a good answer. I actually like 32. That was my favorite age, and that was my favorite birthday party. I had a
Really?
worthy 30 birthday party. Yeah. Okay. Well, Annastahia, I want to thank you so much for one, being patient with me because, it felt like we spent more time. It felt like we spent more time setting up and trying to get our technology on board than it did us talking. So I thank you for being patient with me. I thank you for being vulnerable with me and with our listeners, because you came with a lot of information, but your passion for God and your power and just, I can hear the love and the joy that you're filled with when you speak. It just exudes, it comes out of you, and I can hear how hopeful you are. So I want to thank you so much for bringing that aspect. I also just want to thank you for just being transparent about your motherhood. I'm hopeful for you. I know that you said that one of your biggest fears is that your kids won't be able to talk to you again, and I don't think that's going to happen. Kids need their
No,
moms. They need
they
you.
do. And
They need
at the
you.
end of the day, you know, children don't remain little for long. So then the truth comes out, and then they have their questions. And, you know, I'm there to answer questions. But one thing I won't do is I won't bash the other party, even
Right.
though the other party has bashed me to them,
Right.
you know. But I'm grateful. I'm grateful. And thank you for this opportunity. Listen, it was so much fun being a part of your podcast. And I see this going further than just a podcast eventually for you. I do see that. And keep doing what you're doing. Yeah. And I'm very proud of you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're
I
welcome.
appreciate it. Um, so listen, please be on the lookout for Annastahia Jackson, who will eventually be beyond the bookshelf soon, okay? And
Very.
also, we don't know what it's going to be called, but it will be called something, and something special, okay? Also, keep your eyes and your ears open for Gracefully Broken Ministries, because I know there's going to be another conference for men and women. Follow Annastahia Jackson on social media. Her links will be in the show comments. And if you like this episode and you want to hear more personal parenting stories, not stories, if you want to hear more personal parenting stories, subscribe to my social media, Nailed It Motherhood Podcast on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok, and follow us on your favorite podcast platform. You can also be a guest on the podcast by completing a guest application. The link is in the bio. We welcome your questions, comments, and ideas, and we certainly hope to keep the conversation going. Until next time, keep on doing what it is that you do.
Bye-bye.
Bye.